today. My name is Sarah Smallhouse. I'm on the CAM program committee, and I'm very excited to be here today with you all. I want to welcome you to this session, Collaboration and Community Care as Praxis. I got to see this session live, and so maybe this is your first time seeing the session, maybe it isn't, but it's well worth it. So I'm glad that you are all here. I want to welcome our panelists, Devin Malone, Abram Jackson, Dimitri Bronxton, and Nia McAllister. As we begin this event, we have some housekeeping rules and our land acknowledgement. So I'm going to go ahead and lead you through those. If my screen will participate. Okay. As we begin this event, we acknowledge and honor the original inhabitants of our various regions. California is home to over 150 tribes, and an acknowledgement is just one step towards working with Native communities in meaningful relationships. Museums and many institutions were founded upon purposeful exclusions and erasures of Indigenous people, and still benefit from settler colonialism and associated harms. CAM is committed to moving beyond land acknowledgements and into action. We encourage you and your organizations to find out more about the tribes in your areas and find ways to celebrate and support them. I am on the traditional territory of the Mechoopda-Maido peoples. And Rochelle is going to put a link in the chat. It's a helpful, although not definitive, resource to learn more about the tribes in your areas. Are you ready for the next slide? Okay. All right, so we just have a couple housekeeping rules before we get started. First of all, this webinar is being recorded. Live captioning is available through the National Captioning Institute. For those of you just joining, CAM Programs Manager Rochelle will post the link in the chat box again where you can access the captioning. Thanks, Rochelle. The presenters will respond to questions at the end of the presentation. During the webinar, feel free to type your questions using the Q&A icon or function, which you can find at the bottom of your Zoom screen, and the chat box will open. If you have any technical issues, please send the host a message along with the chat or send an email at programs@calmuseums.org, and we will do our best to address your question. This event is part of CAM's Lunch and Learn free webinar series and is exclusively sponsored by Belfour Property Restoration. More information can be found at their website, www.belfour.com/en/US. All right, and now I am eager to pass it on over to our fabulous presenters today. Take it away.
Abram, should I start as I did when we did it originally? I think I will actually, because this is still relevant. So before we begin our presentation, and many of you have heard me say this if you have seen our presentation at CAM, but before we begin, I do want to share a couple quick remarks to ground us in the global present. I'd say that one tenet of empathy is the ability to form articulations across seemingly disparate ideas, phenomena, and in this case, experiences of marginalization. In this moment, I'd like to acknowledge our brothers and sisters in Gaza, in Sudan, in Haiti, in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, and in all places where our Americanness implies a level of complicity with human suffering. But we are not entitled to the suffering of others, and as such, we are not entitled to silence. You will hear Abram and I discuss our work related to an exhibition called Kehinde Wiley, An Archaeology of Silence, a show of mostly large-scale works by the iconic painter and sculptor, Kehinde Wiley. These works were produced in the wake of the murders of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and serve as a comment on the persistence of silence in the wake of state-sanctioned violence against Blacks in the US. As state and city governments ask us to ignore the development of COP cities across the country, our federal government, as well as many of our institutions, asks that we remain silent in the face of incomprehensible harm against the Palestinian people and so many others around the world. It would be intellectually dishonest to present on an archaeology of silence and its ruminations on state-sanctioned violence without recognizing that these struggles are global and intertwined. This became clear to me when both in 2014, following the murder of Michael Brown, and in 2020, following the murder of George Floyd, Palestinian activists on Twitter shared tips for combating the effects of tear gas at protests. This is solidarity in action. Whether here or there, our oppressors employ the same tactics, and if we are to survive, we must assert a duty of care for one another, but not only when convenient or comfortable. Throughout this presentation, you'll hear words like care and community often. These are not just buzzwords for conference presentations, institutional strategic plans, or grant applications. Care and community are frameworks we build and rebuild through conscious action. They do not simply happen to us, and they are not apolitical. I find it difficult to speak of care for Black visitors and their lived experiences without acknowledging the necessity of global freedom struggle. The root of the matter is that none of us are free until we all are free. Although I do not expect our presentation today to free us all, I do hope that as you listen, you consider the ways your freedom is linked to that of your neighbors in this room or on your block. I also hope that these considerations bring more care to your connections with them. Another thing we wanted to mention in grounding our presentation is just to state that we recognize that there are a variety of allegations against the artists that we're talking about. And we want to acknowledge that, but also acknowledge that the crux of this presentation is actually the work that we've done and the work of our colleagues. And that is what deserves the recognition here more than any singular artist. So I wanted to name that as well, but I'll pass it over to Abram.
Wow, thank you. Thank you so much, Devin. I really appreciate that grounding, and just always appreciate your thoughtfulness and your care and collaboration, which is connected to the topic of our presentation today. My name is Abram Jackson. I use he, him, his pronouns, and I am the Director of Interpretation here at the Fine Arts Museums of San Francisco, which includes the DeYoung Museum, which is in Golden Gate Park in San Francisco, and also the Legion of Honor, which is in Lincoln Park Lands End. I'm joined, of course, by several amazing colleagues, but in terms of from my institution, my colleague, Devin Malone. Devin, would you like to introduce yourself more with more detail?
Sure. Hi. Hello again. My name is Devin Malone. I'm the Director of Public Programs and Community Engagement at the Fine Arts Museums of San Francisco. My work encompasses the production and conceptualization of public programs, community partnerships, and a variety of other things, both at the DeYoung and the Legion. So, with a hyper focus on equity and community care, as hopefully you witnessed throughout this presentation. Thanks, Abram.
And so we are your partners in care as part of this this component of the presentation. And as Devin mentioned, we wanted to talk about the work that we did in terms of our respective roles and across the institution related to the Kehinde Wiley and Archaeology of Silence exhibition, which was presented here at the DeYoung Museum in March of 2023 and ran through the fall of that same year. And I just want to give a little context about this exhibition and share the big idea, which is something that interpretation professionals really support institutions with in cultivating. Part of the fun work that I get to do is to facilitate the distillation of a big idea of an exhibition into 1 or 2 sentences, which is, believe me, really challenging. And for this exhibition, it really is that Kehinde Wiley in Archaeology of Silence confronts the persistence of silence related to systemic violence toward Black people through the visual language of the fallen figure in Western European art. That visual language includes painting and also sculpture. And just to give you some gallery shots and context about how this exhibition looked, in case you did not get a chance to see it, it was definitely dark intentionally with it emphasized spotlighting. And you'll notice in these gallery shots that the objects are larger than life, billboard size paintings and sculptures that are monumental. And part of the context of this is that this exhibition was first premiered at the Venice Biennale, where our director, Tom Campbell, and our curator in charge of contemporary art program, Claudia Schmuckley, saw the exhibition and kind of just knew that this would be something that would be really powerful to host at our institution. And of course, with a lot of conversation and subsequent funding, we were able to bring this exhibition to our museum. And in doing so, we would be the first United States institution to host it. And with the big idea that I shared of this relating or connecting to systemic violence with Black people, we knew that we had to get this right, or to at least emphasize community care in our approach to making sense of this important body of work. For some context about the artists, people often, and many know this, I should say, is that Kehinde Wiley has this practice of positioning Black people in positions of power in the same way that the kind of canonical Western European art practice of portraiture has displayed folks with great power, whether that is clergy or aristocrats, monarchy. Like, there's a way in which those paintings and sculptures have been presented with this kind of focus and celebration of power, and also of the humanity of the subject. And Wiley asks and begs the question, why can't that same veneration be applied to everyday Black people? And so he has this practice of sorts of called street casting, where he would sometimes recruit people, everyday Black folks, and ask them if they would be interested in being painted, and then also ask them in terms of a catalog of sorts of Western European paintings, like what painting resonates with them, how would they like to be presented? And it often manifests in paintings like the one you see in front of you here. And what Wiley does for this show, however, is he forgoes like the verticality that you see here for the horizontal, and thus kind of emphasizes the paintings and sculptures that reflect fallen hero, martyrs, those who are in positions of repose, whether that be rest or even death. And I have some examples before you. This is an 18th century painting titled Sleep, and Wiley updates it with the quintessential Wiley of subjects kind of enveloped in flora. And Devin will get to kind of our public program and community engagement component of this, but I just want to name that part of that included a presentation, our collaboration with Live Free USA, where we were able to bring in mothers whose children were murdered by the state in some capacity. And as part of that program, I had the honor and the privilege of walking those mothers through the exhibition. And I'll never forget MoAD Arbery's mother, who was part of that, and her kind of observation of this painting titled Sleep by Kehinde Wiley. And as you all know, MoAD Arbery was murdered while running, and that was his way to manage a variety of mental health, or just mental health in general. And when she saw this figure with this skin complexion in running clothes, it just really hit her in terms of the impact of this work. But one thing that she said is that this work did something different than what kind of mainstream media did in relationship to her son. She said that often in talking about her son, MoAD Arbery, mainstream media always asked the question about what did this subject do? What did this Black person do to deserve such a fate? And that's often the question, whether it be explicit or implicit. And she said what this painting did is it didn't ask that question. It actually suspended it and really uplifted the humanity of so many who have been murdered by the state. So I just wanted to kind of offer that. And Devin will talk more. This is another great example of an updated painting, or I should say sculpture. The original reference is Stein Gall from 200 BCE. It was a sculpture that considered the perspective of the losing side. And when you think about the metaphor for that, for an updated sculpture of a young Black man in a hoodie, evoking Trayvon Martin, the kind of metaphor and the kind of suggestions are pretty profound. And then this is Morpheus, once again, updated. In thinking about the fact that we would be the first institution in the US to exhibit the show, one thing I knew that we had to do is work with community partners. Here at the Fine Arts Museums of San Francisco, we call those folks interpretation partners. And interpretation partners are people who we work with whose lived experiences are their expertise. And when possible, those folks can really drive the ship when it comes to the interpretive framing of exhibitions. And so given the big idea of this show, I reached out to organizations locally who were working to dismantle systemic violence toward Black people. And I reached out to about 20 organizations and landed with this amazing cohort of 7 people that include folks like Reverend Wanda Johnson, who is one of the co-founders of the Oscar Grant Foundation. She is the mother of Oscar Grant, who was murdered on January 1st, 2009 at the Fruitvale BART station. And has since really dedicated her life to ensuring that no other parent has to experience that pain. Reverend Derica Blackman was one of the folks on the ground as a lead activist of sorts for the Justice for Oscar Grant movement. We worked with Dr. Misha Mosley from the Black Teacher Project because we wanted to have access to someone who was close to teachers who can create curricula for student and family visits that make sense of the exhibition. Hadari Davis is the founder or co-founder of Edutainment for Equity. He's an arts leader in the East Bay. Dr. Keela Kadey is the founder of Change Kadey and is a change management person specializing in issues of DEIA. Andre Singleton is a local artist and co-founder of the Very Black Project. And Pastor Sandra Eve works at the Oscar Grant Foundation. So we met over the course of about eight meetings on Zoom, where I showed them the objects from the show and also what the curator Claudia Schmuckley was writing about the show. And in those meetings, we really developed a sense of community and prioritized our experience of Black people within a context of experiencing, witnessing systemic violence. And that was the kind of the most important component of our work. But what also came out of that was their feedback about our interpretive framing, the didactic language and that we use. And I want to just share some examples of what came out of this partnership. The first is that originally, we really talked about this exhibition in the language of state-sanctioned violence. And the partners kind of spoke up really early on and said, can we expand that to systemic violence? Systemic violence really evokes things that are larger and often not as identified, like the school to prison pipeline, environmental racism, the medical industrial complex, which disproportionately impacts Black women. And then state-sanctioned violence, they noted seemed to solely reflect things like police brutality and vigilante violence. They also noticed, as so many in the art history world, the use of Black bodies or just bodies in general. And they had I think, very astute suggestions to change that to Black people, because using people really works to further humanize those bodies that are represented. And even things like language of victims. There's a lot of language of victims in the didactics, and understandably so. And the edit or ad that the partners offered was victims and survivors, because there's survivors among us. They also gave us many considerations, that all of which were incorporated into the wall text and the interpretive framing. I wanted to share an excerpt of audio tour for the show, which was free. We had a generous donation from the Ford Foundation, in addition to google.org, which allowed our audio tour to be free. And out of the kind of care that came out of the Interpretation Partners meeting, Reverend Wanda agreed to kind of share insights related to objects. So we're not just hearing from a curator are from the artists, which are important contributions to the audio tour, but we're also hearing from community members. And so this is what Reverend Wanda said about the Object Youth Mourning.
When he was killed, this youth mourning was his friends, mourning for the loss of a loved one, mourning for the loss of a friend, mourning for the loss of a family member. Never to go back, to be able to call this person and talk to this person. Never to go back, to be able to joke and laugh and eat with this person. But now, having to face being alone, they laid on the platform and at the hospital, mourning, all of us mourning, but having the questions of why.
Just honoring Reverend Wanda Johnson, and we always have heard, we've continually heard how that the impact of hearing her experience as it relates to this object being one of the most poignant of sorts that really help people understand the kind of big idea and the point of the show, that connecting it to someone local's lived experience. I'm mindful of time, and I just wanted to share that one of the things that also came out of this as it relates to care is that that having affinity experiences for people to move through an exhibition in community is so important, and what should be part of a next practice of sorts for institutions. And so this is a social media post from a visitor who said this: "Dear DeYoung Museum, I would love to experience a Kehinde Wiley exhibition with other Black-bodied folks as a space where we can wail and grieve. Would it be possible to create a Black space like this? Let us sit with this work without the gazes of folks who haven't lived so close to this pain. Let us cry in the magnitude of the complex narratives at play without people talking on phones, talking about a rager they went to last night, and bypassing the enormity this work presents. Let this be Black space. For an hour or two, please." And our friend Dimitri Broxson, my colleague, who you'll hear later in this presentation, suggested that this, connected this person to the institution so that we could then provide for opportunities for affinity groups to move through this exhibition during our evening hours when the museum was closed, or during our Mondays when we're closed. And this is just some of the organizations that we work with. And this is a post where she was appreciative of the work that ensued in us having an affinity-based tour after hours. And with that, I want to just share some takeaways about community care from an interpretation standpoint. That early partnership with community members is a crucial element of care. So often, this might come at the tail end when that feedback or that insight is really too late to be implemented. We want to have a readiness to humbly pivot, just like we did in the case of the affinity tours, like to get that feedback and to lean into it and say we could do something about that. Is care in action, and that engaging visitors in racial ethnic affinity is an affirming approach. Something, a lot of us have been raised in a colorblind kind of context as it relates to affinity, and it's actually okay to lean into kind of a race forward, ethnic forward, and other types of affinity in thinking about community care. And with that, I'll pass this over to my colleague Devin Malone.
Thank you so much, Abram. I appreciate that. And always love hearing your presentation, actually, even though we've done it together so many times. So I'm Devin Malone, Director of Public Programs and Community Engagement at the Fine Arts Museums of San Francisco. During my part of the presentation, I'll try to keep it brief, but I'm hoping to give an overview of the spaces that were developed specifically for this exhibition, share some of the resources we created to sort of support our visitors, and also describe my team's contributions to the project before, during, and after the exhibition run. And I want to highlight again my team and so many teams across the museum, because they're incredible folks and they make so much happen, including all the work we did around this project. Public programs at FAMSF includes myself, it includes Rosario Sotelo, it includes Rocio Garcia, and it includes Maria Egoaville. So giving them a shout out because they're so important to our work. So the images from that first slide were actually from the sold out opening day conversation. So yay, we love that. That was with the artist and with curator Claudia Schmuckli. Next slide, thank you. So to talk about spaces, as Abram mentioned, when this project was initially announced internally, we really knew that we had a responsibility to take care of our visitors, namely Black visitors, who might have a closer proximity to the themes on view, right? So we thought about the variety of ways we could sort of support visitors in this way, but ultimately we decided to think about a dedicated, sort of respite room located in the Textile Education Gallery adjacent to the exhibition, which featured texts as well as like a sort of altar for leaving notes, small objects, or other reflections, as well as a resource library located in the Piazzoni Murals Room featuring books and articles recommended by a variety of folks, including myself and some interpretation partners as well. And this is really important because these two spaces really represent a shift in the museum in terms of thinking about audience more intentionally. These are not spaces that are normally used for sort of community use in the way that they were used for this exhibition. So I think that's really important to name. And then I will also read the quote here because this is something that's very much been informing my work and my thinking for this project and so many other things. Urbanist and political geographer Edward Soja describes spatial justice as the fair and equitable distribution in space of socially valued resources and opportunities to use them. So this principle of spatial justice is very important to me and informing this project. Next slide, thank you. So the image, the image from that previous slide was actually some folks standing near one of the respite room alcoves. Thank you again for going back to that. And then moving so fast, Abram. But what you're now seeing is actually a floor plan of the resource library, which was housed, as I said, in the Piazzoni Murals Room, and featured paper accordion furniture by Molo Designs and a custom table by Waka Waka Inc., which we have repurposed since. I worked really closely with exhibition design to choose furniture that would be highly modular for use during a variety of activation types over the course of the exhibition. This is actually not a way that public programs typically collaborates at the museums. So this is a new way of working that I found super exciting and a way of working that we've been able to sort of move forward in other projects as well. As I mentioned, the design, execution, and maintenance of these spaces require collaboration with a lot of folks. That includes exhibition design, publications, visitor experience, and so many others throughout FAMSF. So in addition to the books available in the respite room and the, next slide, sorry. This is also one of the alcoves featuring texts that relate to a variety of topics, not just things like art history, but in the respite room specifically, we were really thinking about poetry, grief resources, and so many other things that sort of build the universe of the exhibition, right? And might actually be supportive after experiencing the exhibition. So thinking about grief, thinking about healing practices, thinking about poetry as a healing technology as well. So lots of resources to sort of support the visitor throughout. Let's see. Next slide. So in addition to the books in the respite room and the resource library, there's also this printed resource guide that features local and national resources for things related to organizing, mental health, grief, etc. So on the left, you see the resource guides in one of their homes on site. And to the right, there's an excerpt from the resource guide. I will not read this paragraph because I know we're running short on time, but just to know that this is very much a means to support the visitor in taking action in their own lives, because often we feel overwhelmed and don't know how to address the issues that we're seeing in our world. So this is an attempt to provide some resources and some action steps for folks. Next slide, thank you. So 3 phases of work for public programs includes pre-exhibition, during the exhibition, post-exhibition. But a huge thing sort of pre-exhibition was collaborating with exhibition design, writing and editing texts, curating and soliciting book selections. But during the exhibition, as Abram mentioned, we partnered with gun violence prevention organization Live Free USA to build out a 6-part archaeology of silence speaker series, as well as collaborated with artist and death doula Angela Hennessy, as well as Minister Marvin K. White, on a series of 3 workshops exploring individual and collective grief. The image on your screen is actually from our sold out Black August conversation with Angela Davis. Next slide. So over the course of the exhibition run, we actually executed a total of 10 public programs, which is actually really uncommon for an exhibition, including a culminating concert in Golden Gate Park, attended by over 1,600 visitors. This included liaising with SF Rec and Park to secure permits. Shout out to my colleague Maria on my team for being super supportive in that endeavor. The image you're seeing on your screen is actually from that concert. That felt really like a beautiful way to culminate the exhibition and really invite our community to participate in a very intentional way. Next slide. Another huge aspect of the exhibition and the work that has been done after the exhibition is the collection of comment cards from visitors left in the respite room. So we wanted to provide a space for people to leave notes, reflections, thoughts, and we have held on to those. So I still have a bunch of these. We have several thousand of them, in fact. And some of these are, I won't share too many of them or any of them really, but I will say in summary that they're really heartfelt and really vulnerable and really special when you get it to read, you know, and I think that they serve as a really great document of the exhibition, but also of the time. Next slide. So, we're already at the conclusion. But I wanted to just share that specificity, as Abram sort of mentioned when he was talking about affinity groups, specificity is impactful. And it allows visitors and collaborators to feel seen in a way that is deep and organic. Creating spaces of care and collaboration is challenging, but also very positive. And when I say challenging, I mean challenging in the way that working at large institutions is always challenging. There are many stakeholders, spaces at a premium, and there are a lot of decision makers involved in making any one decision. But it all worked out, and it was really great to see the museum rally around this project and really taking care of our visitors. And third, and finally, community is the true locus of respite. That is where we find the care, the base, the foundation, the root. And I think that that is something that we're really trying to unfold in our work, both I think at the museums and arguably in the world in general. So I'll leave it there and pass it on to our wonderful colleagues at MoAD. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Abram and Devin, for starting us off. I'm excited to be sharing on behalf of Museum of the African Diaspora. My name is Nia McAllister, and I'm the Senior Public Programs Manager at MoAD. And myself and my colleague, Dimitri Braxton, will be sharing a couple of our projects. I'm going to pass it on to Dimitri briefly to introduce himself before we dive in.
Hey everyone, my name is Dimitri Braxton. I'm the Senior Director of Education at Museum of the African Diaspora, and I'll give you a little bit more context when I go over to you, Nia.
Great, thank you. So I'm going to give just ground us a little bit in what MoAD does, if you're not familiar. MoAD is a contemporary art museum, and our mission is to celebrate Black cultures, ignite challenging conversations, and inspire learning through the global lens of the African diaspora. And our museum is located at 3rd and Mission Street in San Francisco, right in the Yerba Buena Arts District. We were founded in 2005, and we've been an essential part of the local arts ecosystem and also playing a role nationally and globally in platforming contemporary Black artists. And we present around 10 exhibitions a year, and those range from commissioned pieces, traveling exhibits, and then also uniquely curated shows by our curatorial staff. And so I represent today the Public Programs Department, and public programs at MoAD support the exhibitions on view, as well as expand the entry points for our audiences to engage with the museum. And so on average, we present anywhere between 60 to 100 public programs a year. That includes both our virtual and in-person offerings, which range from artist talks, film screenings, performances, poetry programs, and various partnerships also with our neighboring institutions. And so on this topic of collaboration and community care, I'm going to be focusing on a specific series that I run called Community Voices Poets Speak, as an example of how we've been able to partner with our communities to actually generate program content that expands upon the exhibitions on view. And this idea of participatory programming is something that's really important to me in all of my program work, and thinking about how are we shifting agency into the hands of our presenters, really engaging our audiences and attendees in crafting the content that we present at the museum. And so this photo you'll see here is one of our cohorts of our Community Voices Poets Speak series, which I'll share a little bit more about. But this series was started in 2017. It's a multi-week series that is directly in conversation with the art that is on view at the museum. And so we present this series about annually in response to a new exhibition each year. And it's really at the core grounded on this idea of ekphrastic poetry, which is the process of writing in response to visual art. And so you can read here on the screen a definition of ekphrastic writing or ekphrastic poetry as defined by the Poetry Foundation. But through this series, this multi-week series, we invite anywhere between 6 to 8 local poets to write original work in response to the exhibitions on view. And by using poetry and spoken word to reflect on the exhibitions, it's an exciting way to create a new entry point for visitors to connect with the visual art on view, and also for the artists who we're inviting to center their lived experiences in the process. And so this series is kind of multi-part. The first part of this series is the observation process. And so when an exhibition opens, we have selected these poets to come in. They usually have a couple months to spend time at the museum in their own time, at their own pace, on a drop-in basis, really taking in the exhibitions. We provide the invited poets with free admission to the museum. They're also paid and compensated for the writing that they do, as well as the performance elements which come later in the series. And it's important, those elements that I just mentioned that are part of this program, that we're compensating artists for their time and also reducing barriers to access for our community. And so after spending time observing the exhibitions through this process, these poets are then invited to reflect on the artwork, whether that's taking note of the colors they see, the texture, material, the themes, the geography of the artists, and using these as entry points and jumping off points to then write original work in response to the artwork. And again, the exciting part about this series, talking about community care, talking about collaboration, is that we really are shifting agency into the hands of these invited poets. The only container that we as the institution provide is that the work they create must be in response to the exhibition. The direction that these artists then take to interpret that art is up to them. And I think that's a really cool opportunity to see various ways that these different voices and these different people are going to see and then reflect upon the artwork. And so after the poets have written original work in response to the exhibitions, they have 2 opportunities to share that work with our public, with our audiences. And so they have, the first opportunity is a individual poetry reading where they have 30 minutes in gallery to share their work. And yeah, as you can see in this image here, these are folks gathered directly in the gallery in front of the artwork that the poet is responding to. And beyond just, getting to see different pieces in an exhibition highlighted through the work of these poets, it's also an interesting way to break the kind of traditional programming format in terms of the layout of the room. Many of our public programs at the museum are hosted in a specific room called our salon, where we often have theater style seating and a presenter up front. With this Community Voices Poets Speak series, our audience and our poets are all in one more intimate space. We're in the galleries, people are, as you can see, sitting on the floor. We do also have chairs provided. But it feels like a different kind of gathering where our audience is also invited to ask questions, to respond to the work that they're hearing. People are physically surrounded by the art. And I think that's, it's a new way to then be immersed in the artwork. And the second component of the presentation is also, being a celebration. And so after the poets have this opportunity to individually share their work, all of them in the cohort are gathered together for a culminating performance in which they might share some of the same work they shared at their individual reading, or also new work that's developed since that original reading. It's also an opportunity for the cohort to be in conversation, their work to be in conversation with each other. And also to celebrate that the work that they've produced. It's no easy task asking people just to come up with new work in response to an exhibition. And so it's a great way to bring these different voices together in a physical sense. And it is a program that is hosted in a more traditional format. This is hosted in our salon. And so it's nice in this series having different program formats for our audiences to also be engaging with. And so since I've been describing all of this, I think it'd be helpful for you to also see and experience what this looks like. And so I have two short clips I'll play for you. This is from this most recent cohort, which was in January and February of this year. And this first one, you'll see a poet named Portia Veyu, and she's responding to an artwork by artist Tawny Chapman, who was featured in the exhibition Spectrum on Color and Contemporary Art, which was curated by Kijo Lee, our Chief of Curatorial Affairs and Public Programs.
So this piece is called Our Utopia. This is for every Black girl that has ever felt less than, ever felt like they couldn't show up and be their full selves in this world. They wake up in a bed of scented flowers, and no one ignores them. And their bodies remain untouched, except for hugs given by souls who would lay their lives down for them. And they are the center of attention. And what they create is not stolen. And their clothes are adorned with "you're beautiful, you're worthy, you're treasured," while strutting in shoes laced with "you is kind, you is smart, you is important." So this piece is called Our Utopia.
There we go. And then this next short clip is of poet Reggie Edmonds, who is, this was from a couple years ago. They're responding to the exhibition, The New Black Vanguard, Photography Between Art and Fashion, which was curated by Antoine Sargent.
Color is not our enemy. It is both our birthright and our legacy. It is passed down from generation to generation, and I inherited rainbow hands snatching at all the light, catching colors and calling them mine. And is that not bold? Is that not Black? Is that not beautiful? Color is not our enemy.
There we go. And so if we're talking about collaboration, I can't speak about this series without the partnership of other organizations who have helped co-curate this series. You can see, Youth Speaks, Nomadic Press, Cave Canem, Poets and Writers, Black Freighter Press, and Small Distribution. They've all been our partners since this series was established in 2017. And partnership has looked like various things throughout the years. It has looked like the co-curation of which poets are selected for the cohort. It has looked like marketing. It has looked like actually, switching off when we introduce these series. And it's really allowed us to expand our audiences, not only in our attendees, but also the poets that we invite. So when we worked with Youth Speaks, we really focused on having young local Black artists, featured in this series. Other times it's been about working with a specific publisher to bring in poets who are all published through the same publisher. So it's just really been an essential part of making this program successful. And so to close my slides, just thinking about this series as an example of what it means to be in collaboration, what it means to be in partnership with our artists, with our poets, with our audiences. And so as I mentioned, it's been a bridge for connecting folks to MoAD, connecting the artists to themselves, and connecting our audiences to the work that we're doing. Throughout it all, trust and respect has been really central when we talk about shifting agency to artists or shifting agency to our audiences. That's about trust. It's about saying, you who are coming here to our space also have a voice that we need to hear, that we need to be able to incorporate into our processes. And so I'm very proud of this program and how it's grown and shifted over the years, and how we've been able to have these collaborators seriously be a part of creating what the program looks like. And as I mentioned in previous slides, it has changed over time, and that's part of doing public programming, is learning from what works, learning from what may not have worked, and knowing that things are going to continue evolving. And as you may have seen from some of the images, especially those events that are hosted in the gallery, they're very intimate. And oftentimes the success of our work is measured by how many people came or how much money a program made. And yes, those are important metrics, but sometimes the impact is also assessed by what are the conversations that are happening, how are people feeling seen and heard when they're in the space of these programs. And so I just wanted to highlight that's another way that we think about the success of programs. And this program is going to continue in the future and hopefully have even more presence at the museum, partner with new organizations, hopefully also incorporate some of the work that's created into the production of exhibitions or wall text or other things. And so I'm excited to see future developments for this program, and I really appreciate you all listening, and I'm going to pass it off to my colleague Dimitri to share more about another project.
Hey everyone, so I'm here to talk to you about a specific program in the education department called MoAD in the Classroom. Next slide, please. So here's a view within another one of our galleries at MoAD. And just to reiterate what Nia was saying, MoAD is a world-class contemporary art museum. Oh, back one more. And so one of the largest education programs at MoAD is called MoAD in the Classroom, and it serves 3rd and 4th grade students who are ages 8 to 10 years old. An interpretation of contemporary art for students is age can pose major challenges, but our practice of care is what allows this work to come alive for young students. Pictured here is an exhibition that we did, I want to say this was 2016 and 2017. It actually was the very first solo exhibition of artist Toyin Oji Odutola ever. I don't think MoAD gets the credit for that. She's talking about a lot of issues of class and race and society within her works. And so the task was to do that within our program. I need to acknowledge, following Devin's model, my team. I have a very large team. It's not just me who does this, so I don't want to take the credit. I want to acknowledge Simone Salah, who is the program manager, Darian Beeman, who is our program coordinator, and then our teaching artists, Amber, Asia, Emilian, Asul, Faye, Jemiah, Ramona, and Shalia. We couldn't do this work without them. So next slide. As part of the program, we charter buses to bring 1,500 students to the museum, and we do this twice each year. So once in the beginning of the spring and then once at the end of the spring. We think it's important to balance the classroom visits with museum visits so that students experience artwork firsthand. Because of the scale of the museum, we're not a huge museum. We only have 3 floors and 3 galleries. So having 75 to 100 students in the museum, allowing them to take over our galleries can be all encompassing of the space. And our visits happen during the week between the hours of 10 o'clock a.m. and 11:30 a.m. So they have a 30-minute overlap with our general public. Next slide, please. MIT teaching artists visit public school classrooms, and they make this year actually between 8 to 10 visits over the course of the school year, and visits typically last 90 minutes in length. This allows for a deep connection and partnership with classroom teachers. And I want to add that this program has been around since 2014. And year over year, since the beginning of the program, 90% of the participating teachers have returned to us. And out of the bunch of teachers that we have, I think we have, like, how many do we have this year? 34 teachers that we've been working with. All of them have been with us for at least 5 years. All right, next slide, please. We think that it's really important. I love when I show this image and let people know that 8 and 9-year-olds are the creators of these. People get really shocked. But we think that bringing real art tools into the classroom is an important component beyond Crayola markers or whatever other objects that are typically in an art classroom within the school. The final project, which is what you're seeing right here, always centers students' personal identities. Because we serve Title I schools, that means that 50% or more of the students qualify for free or reduced lunch. Another interpretation is that they are at or below the poverty line. For our area, because of that and the demographics of the students, people are often shocked that Museum of the African Diaspora, actually the largest group that we serve of students are Latino students, or Latinx students, I should say. And so even though we're presenting them with Black art, we want to make sure that they're making personal connections to their own identities. So within this project where they did these scratch board self-portraits, they're using real scratch tools, so sharp metal objects. And then we also teach them how to use graphite paper to transfer their portraits onto this, which is a real tool that artists use. And again, these are made by 8 and 9-year-old students. Next slide, please. We decide to really practice care. We don't only serve the students and the teachers that we work with within the classroom context, we also bring them to the museum and we go out to them and to other cultural institutions around the Bay Area to provide 40 hours of professional development for teachers each year. In 2016, the state of California passed these teacher training protocols, which require that all teachers trained in the state of California also integrate the arts into their curriculum, but the state has not provided any actual training. So we want to make sure that we have wraparound supports for the teachers. We partnered with an organization called Studio Pathways, and we taught the teachers how to incorporate movement and kinesthetic learning into their curriculum. It was really fun to see teachers let down their guards. Next slide, please. And each year we produce a brand new student workbook. This one featured Kehinde Wiley, who was the artist at the DeYoung, also featured, and comparing his work to the work of Toyin Oji Odutola, as well as other artists such as Yinka Sonebari. So the students are learning about the artists in our gallery, but other connected artists and expanding their knowledge of Black artists. Next slide, please. So the program is not just about making art. We also seek to receive input from students and teachers. So we do this each year through surveys, focus groups, and the focus groups actually happen with both teachers and students, which is really great, separately. So separate focus groups with teachers and separate ones with the students, as well as our teaching artists to get their input on what's going well with our program and what needs improvement. So every single year, we try to improve our program, and that's also how we care for our community that we serve. We never think that we get it right, even though now we're in 10 years of operating this program. The program actually originated as an English language arts program in 2014. And in 2016, we shifted to a focus on art making due to a feedback we received from a focus group with our teachers. And I want to note that the teachers that participated in that focus group are still with the program 10 years later, that same group. Next slide, please. Here's the theory of action. I won't bore you with this, but this is the theory of action for the program. And this one is actually a little old. We need to update it because now we do much more than the 4 to 8 additional teaching artist visits to the classroom. We do 8 to 10 each year. But you can see kind of our idea is that the programs, having the students participate in these high quality programs has these different benefits. And so this last year, we also completed a field scan with our partners, Public Profit, who is an organization in Oakland, California, that does the evaluation for us. And we are also hoping to develop our own evaluation tool for other similar programs at museums. So if anyone is interested, talk to me, send me a message. So we want to implement this so that we can compare our programs with other museum programs that are similar. Next slide, please. And we really just want to emphasize the value of joy. So I love this image. So joy for children of color opens new doors when they see themselves reflected and validated. Unleashing their joy says to them that they are free to dream and set goals without limits. According to the Center of Excellence for Infant and Early Childhood Mental Health Consultation for Children of Color, quote, reclaiming a sense of joy is necessary amid racial uprisings, a global pandemic, and increasing social economic challenges. So we want to make sure that we center that, especially as we go into this next election year. Next slide, please. And again, like I said, we practice this continual improvement cycle. This is what the basis of our theory of change, which is also based on Maslow's pyramid of human need, or the hierarchy of human need. And so even though the program at this point can be plug and play, there's major value in us continually making improvements to the program based on the feedback of participants. The field also changes. The field of arts and arts education changes constantly, as well as the needs of our students, especially since 2020. Next slide, please. So this is just looking into the future. We are hoping to expand the program gradually each year over the next 4 years to double in size. So currently serving 1,500 students, we're looking to serve at least 3,000 by the year 2027. And we also want to expand the program not just to 3rd and 4th grade, but all the way to 12th grade through high school. We experimented with 5th grade a few years ago and realized that we needed actually a brand new curriculum and approach to reaching those students. Even just from 4th grade to 5th grade, there's a huge change in students' needs and also what keeps their attention. Currently, we're partnering with 3 local school districts, and we've also developed a curriculum advisory committee with those 3 districts within Berkeley, San Francisco, and Oakland. And we just met for the first time this last May. The goal is to solicit feedback from representatives from Oakland, San Francisco, and Berkeley. So this comprises of teachers on special assignment, district representatives, and the specialties of history, social studies, and ethnic studies. And we want their input from day one. Before we even launch these programs for expanded grades, we're hoping that in the summer of 2026, we will launch a teacher institute focusing on our new curriculum. And hopefully we will pilot those lessons the following school year and then hold student and teacher focus groups to see how that goes. And then the very next school year, in the 27-28 school year, we hope to launch the expanded grades at that time. And is that my last slide? Oh no, I have one more. So thank you for this, and then I'll do my finishing thoughts on that. So my concluding thoughts are bring beneficiaries into the planning process from the beginning and throughout the process. You saw that reflected in Abram's presentation. Also, it's important, I should mention that most of our facilitators are people of color. So it's important, and they're also from the communities, born and raised in the communities, living in the communities that we serve. So it's important that your facilitators reflect who you want to serve, so they share that same lived experience. And then also making intentional space for joy and expression of that joy within the museum. So sometimes we do get loud in the galleries, and our visitor experience team lets visitors know when they're coming in that there are children that are learning. And as long as we let people know, they're happy with it. So we're breaking down the silence of our galleries. All right, thank you, everyone.
Okay, thank you so much to our presenters and for going beyond that 1 p.m. mark to finish your presentations. I'm so very glad. And if you all are willing to hang on just for a moment, I want to pause just to see if there's any questions. I haven't seen any in the chat. Maybe you're blown away and kind of speechless, or your wheels are already turning, you're already thinking of great ideas you can implement at your own organizations. So let's just pause for 1 minute for folks to drop questions in the chat. And while you're typing those or maybe thinking about them, I want to remind folks that this is just one of 3 of these Lunch and Learn programs in July. So we have 2 more upcoming on the 18th and the 25th. So please join us for those. Okay. Okay.
Thanks,
Thank you
Al.
very much. And yeah, we have some fundraising workshops in August and early September. Those are under the Learn button of the CAM website. And please save the date for our 2025 annual conference, where all these wonderful ideas get presented in person. It will be in San Francisco, February 18th through 21st, and the theme is interwoven. So thank you so much for joining us. Thank you again immensely to our panelists for presenting again today. And thanks for attending, and have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.